Hello, I'm Peter Brews, an Associate Dean at the Kenan-Flagler Business School at UNC-Chapel Hill. In my work at the Business School, I have been privileged to work with a number of outstanding CEOs of Fortune 500 companies and to study why they have been so successful in developing and executing imaginative strategies for their worldwide businesses. It is particularly significant to me, therefore, that I am here with an outstanding leader of our own great public university, Emeritus Chancellor James Moeser. James, you are usually the interviewer in this video, but to explain to our viewers why we insisted that you be on that side of the camera today, I need do no more than quote and slightly add to the citation that went with the William R. Davey Award, given to you by UNC's trustees in 2010. They said in part, and I quote, "During your 2000 to 2008 tenure, the Carolina First campaign raised a record-setting $2.38 billion. You helped launch the Carolina Covenant, providing a debt-free education to deserving low-income students, now a national model. You oversaw the largest capital construction campaign in campus history, developed our first academic plan, improved faculty salaries, supported major research initiatives, such as UNC's leading genetics program, and oversaw steady growth in faculty research funding, now up to $800 million annually." The trustees went on to say that you revitalized planning for Carolina North, furthered global initiatives, and launched Carolina Performing Arts, considered today one of the nation's top 10 university arts presenting programs. When you listen to that record, I have no doubt that what we are going to be talking about over the next hour or so will be of tremendous value to our viewers in this series. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Peter.
The first question I'd like to put forward is, you arrived at Carolina in 2000 with an already very extensive and valuable career in academic leadership. What did you learn that you carried forward to UNC when you arrived here?
Well, you're right. I did have a varied background, and it turns out, I didn't plan this, I should say, from the outset. This was all serendipitous. But the experiences that I had on other campuses and in other settings really were helpful to me. I started out my academic career, my first appointment was at the University of Kansas in 1966-67. I should say, I think people even bring with them the values of the institutions where they studied. So I was a student at the University of Texas at Austin, 2 degrees from Texas, and a doctorate from the University of Michigan. I could come back to that because I had tremendous role models as a youngster, as a student, that were formative for me through that part of my life, and later I also had role models in some of the positions where I helped. So I was at the Universities of Kansas, Penn State University, University of South Carolina, Nebraska, and then here. All very different places, all with different cultures, with different value systems, with different points of excellence and quality. And one of the things I learned is that no institution is like another. They're all different, and one has to approach them all individually. But that cumulative set of experiences was enormously valuable to me when I arrived in 2000.
So what were the differences that you discovered here at UNC relative to perhaps the other institutions that you had led?
Well, previous to coming here, I was Chancellor of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and where I served in that capacity for 4 years, and I did 4 years as Provost at the University of South Carolina. In both cases, I decided that my job as Provost at South Carolina and then later as Chancellor at Nebraska was to do my best to lead those institutions to build on the strengths that they had, and frankly not to worry about their weaknesses very much, but to try to concentrate. At South Carolina, we used to talk about building cathedrals of excellence, and what we really meant was that we had selected areas where we thought that could be niche programs. For example, in your field, in the business school, South Carolina is not a top 20, probably not a top 50 business school, but they had one program, the MIBS program, the Master of International Business, which was either ranked 1 or 2 in the country at the time, and I think still is highly ranked. So we said, okay, if at business, we're going to be about international business. That's a niche. That's a place where we can excel. And we had other areas that I could have pointed to. And the same was true at Nebraska. Not universally strong, but areas of strength. In both cases, I tried to rally the faculty and the alumni support to build support for those areas of excellence. Now cut to the year 2000, and I came to Chapel Hill at a really fortuitous moment for me, but also for this university. This university I had known about for my whole career. At Kansas, where I was a dean, the Vice Chancellor and the Board of Regents had selected Chapel Hill as one of the 4 aspirant peer institutions for the University of Kansas. So from early in my days at Kansas, I knew that this was a great university. It had a great history. It was a distinguished public university. I obviously studied all of these data about graduation rates and retention rates and compared them to the data that I knew at Nebraska. It was stunningly different. So I knew that there was a great sense of quality here. There was a great sense of a wonderful tradition of excellence. And so I knew that the agenda that I had put in place for 2 other universities was not the right agenda for this place. In fact, I did a lot of internal reallocation of resources. At South Carolina, it was actually a process we copied from Penn State that I'd seen at work there, called the University Future Committee. I appointed a committee of the most outstanding faculty to give this credibility, because what I was really setting about to do was a fairly massive internal reallocation of resources, subtracting resources from weak areas and adding it to either strong areas or areas that had the potential to be strong. And I knew that to pull this off, I had to have standing with me the faculty with the greatest degree of credibility on that campus. I was a brand new provost coming in to basically do chemotherapy, shock treatment, if you will, on a campus. And we pulled it off, and we made, I think, significant difference. I did something similar at Nebraska. And so when I came here, one of the first questions I got from faculty was, are you going to do the same thing here that you did at 2 other places? Perfectly reasonable and legitimate question. And I quickly answered no, because this is a different setting. This is a different situation. And what I did at 2 other places, I don't need to do here. This is a very different university. It's a university with the potential to be excellent in everything we do. And that's the definition of really a great university. Michael Hooker had established a vision of being the #1 public university. I thought that was pretty amazing, pretty audacious. I thought it was also slightly dangerous, because there's no such thing as being #1. And the second concern I had about it is that aspiring to be #1 infers, if not explicitly states, that there's an endpoint that you're striving for. And once you've accomplished that, there's only one direction one can go, and that's back downhill. So I subtly changed that and changed the language to aspiring to be the leading public university, because that suggests a continuum of striving for excellence, which I thought was an important and significant, if subtle, difference. And I said in my installation address that being a truly great university means that we can't tolerate weakness in anything that we do. That if we have a program and we're going to keep it, then we have got to put the resources in it to take it up to be nationally competitive. And that was the strategy that we employed here. So it was a recognition that this was a very different place. It was also, I didn't say this because this is not something I should have said or would have said, but this was, while it was a truly great university, it was also teetering on the edge of complacency and even a kind of malaise. Partly, I think, as a result of the lack of direction, as a result of Michael Hooker's tragic and sudden death in office as Chancellor, and a period of not really having strong direction because of just the fact that we had a deceased Chancellor, We had interim leadership in many of the dean's offices across. I think almost half the dean's chairs were empty. I had to hire a provost and a vice chancellor for finance and administration, so the deck was almost empty. That was a tremendous opportunity, but I also sensed that this place needed it needed a strong shot of adrenaline to recharge its batteries. And that came in an interesting and wonderful sense of timing. I used to say that timing is everything in hand grenades and politics, and it also happens to be the same in university administration. In the fall of 2000, I arrived in August. In the fall of 2000, we went to the polls to convince the voters of North Carolina to pass the higher education bond issue. $3.2 billion, the largest construction bond issue ever attempted by any state in the United States. So I spent my first months literally going around the state with the other chancellors and the assistant president. Everybody was engaged in this with the community colleges to convince the people to pass this bond issue. And on my installation address, I pledged to the people that if you'll pass this bond issue, we'll triple your investment with private fundraising. So that was, I had no knowledge that we could really pull that off, but it was a bold gesture to say we're serious about this and we're going to move this university forward.
So if I could just summarize, I think, for our viewers what you've just said before we get into a deeper conversation about what you found at Carolina and what you did then. I think your first comment is history matters.
It does.
Context is important. And it sounds to me that the lesson you learned in the other institutions that you served is that smart leadership first tries to work out the history and the context before you come in there with any bright ideas of what to do.
That's absolutely true. In the months before, between my election in April and my arrival in August, the good news is that my phone stopped ringing in Lincoln. My email stopped. I was a lame duck chancellor. No one wanted to talk to me. So I used that time to intensively, I became a student, a crash course student of the history of this place. I read every book I could get my hands on, the biography of Bill Friday, the biography of Frank Porter Graham, the Light on the Hill, which is the history of the university, everything I could read about North Carolina because I was keenly aware that this is a place that prides itself on its tradition, that I was an unusual appointment in that I had no prior Tar Heel connections, and I was immediately suspect as a result of that. And I was determined that when I arrived here in August, there was no one in Chapel Hill, no one anywhere in the state was going to know more than I did. They might know as much. That I was not ever going to be caught flat-footed not knowing the history of this place. So I studied the entire history from Davie forward. I knew about every single president, all the crises. I knew about the Civil War closing. I knew about the reopening, and I knew about the Paul Hardin's struggles with the Black Cultural Center. I knew about the great work that Howard Odom had done, about Frank Porter Graham and what a giant on the field he was. I knew all of that because, you're right, I felt it was incumbent upon me as an outsider to fully internally appreciate the history and context of this place.
So let me add to that just a brief question. How long did it take before you felt you really knew what you needed to know about the institution? How long does that sort of knowledge, gathering take?
Well, I never stopped learning, and I accumulated a massive amount of information in a short period of time before I arrived. But I continued to study the place and to try to understand it the whole time I was here. I think I had. Maybe I learned 80% of what I needed to know by the time I arrived, but I continued to understand it better and better, mostly by traveling around the state, by listening, not only to people on the campus. I did a lot of listening on the campus, but by going to Raleigh, talking to the lawmakers and opinion leaders in the state, but also going to the small towns in this state. I took every one of those bus tours that we took faculty on, and I learned enormously from just listening to the people. And one of the things I learned was the enormous pride that people in little boroughs and villages, and this is a town filled with small towns, that everywhere you go in the state, people are proud of this university. Even if they don't like our politics, if they think we're a liberal bastion, they still are enormously proud of this place. And that's, to come back to the bond issue, that's the secret of the success of that campaign, which passed in all 100 counties by 60 to 75% plurality. I mean, it was an amazing statement of support for this university, albeit for the whole university system and the community colleges, but by and large, it was a statement of support for the University of North Carolina as we know it at Chapel Hill.
So if we take your idea that context and history matters, can you talk a little bit about more of the details of actually what you found when you got here and did an institutional assessment of Chapel Hill? I think you found some surprising deficiencies that you then set out to remedy, right?
Well, as I said, there was there wasn't much sense of direction. There was and I think an almost alarming sense of complacency that things were fine. And the fact is that the university had weathered this crisis of the death of the Chancellor amazingly well, and it had gone on. But I also felt that we really needed to shore up private support. We needed to ultimately to have. I needed a strong partner at my right to lead the preparation of an academic plan, which ultimately we did when Robert Shelton came to be the provost, and we. Very shortly after I arrived, it actually turns out that there was more serendipity. There was a tremendously good budget year in which we got something like 65 faculty lines. It was even before we'd appointed Robert, and Dick Edwards was in the provost's office as acting provost. And the first big opportunity I had, it was in my first year, to make a real statement of direction for the university was, I'll never forget, one day he came into my office and he said, you know, we've got this bolus of faculty positions that have come as a result of enrollment growth and a kind of backlog of what the state owed us, and they finally had the money, and I thought, by the way, I never saw that many faculty positions come in at one time, and I thought I had just arrived in heaven, and having been at a much different context in two other places. But the suggestion that had been generated by Jeff Haupt and others, and going to Dick and ultimately to me was, you know, we have an opportunity. Here's an area where we don't have very much going on, but this is the future of health sciences research is going to depend on having a fundamental base in genomics and genetics. And what if we allocated 18 faculty lines and a significant amount of operational budgetary support across a broad spectrum, not only medicine and public health and pharmacy, but also in departments in the college, not just the science departments, but philosophy got a position, School of Law got a position, Library and Information Science got a position, but a broad collective of positions that would really move Carolina into the genomics the frontier at that point. The School of Medicine was already in the process of recruiting Terry Magnuson to come from Case Western Reserve. So he became part of that, and he brought with him his whole research team, his whole junior faculty and graduate students, and something like 10,000 mice. And that was the beginning of the whole development, of which has led to an enormous success in research productivity. It's had tributaries in a number of areas, but it was an important statement to say that we were going to take some big steps. We weren't going to just let these positions go out into the university incrementally and where they would have ultimately been frankly invisible and would have had no impact. We decided to take, and it was a certain gamble, I suppose, but it was a signal that we were going to go after some big ideas.
So it's understood in the management literature that taking big bets or ambitious goals, or I think as Collins calls hairy audacious goals,
right,
is an important part of leadership. This sounds to me like one of those. Is that a reasonable?
That's a fair, yes, it's a fair statement. And in fact, we made the decision as we had this bolus of planning of construction money, roughly $525 million that came from the state bond issue. by the way, every one of those building projects was tagged with a responsibility for us to raise private funds. They knew that Chapel Hill could raise money, and we were on the cusp of a capital campaign. So there was a big responsibility on our part to match. That's where my pledge of tripling that investment came from. And I decided early on that to finish out this big bet, we not only had to provide these faculty positions, but we had to really commit ourselves to major construction in the physical and health sciences. In my earliest days on campus, I was given a walking tour. It was in part, and I had a television camera following me around and still photographers, because this was part of the campaign of the worst horror stories of the inept and inadequate, and even in some cases dangerously inadequate facilities on our campus. Of course, one of the first places they took me was Venable Hall, 1929 building, which still housed our chemistry department, probably the 5th-rated analytical chemistry department in the world, in this horrible facility. I saw similar facilities for the School of Public Health and for medicine. I also saw the music library in the basement of Hill Hall. These were all facilities that needed repair. But the decision I made early on was that, and this was in part a recognition of suspicion about me as a performing artist coming in to be the chancellor of this university, that the first big investments that we needed to make ought to be in science, hence the investment in genomics, but also the decision that we would not hold back in building the facilities that our physical scientists needed to do their work. We had so far been successful in retaining key faculty who stayed here on the faith that ultimately we would solve these facilities issues, which were hampering their ability to do first-class work. But they believed us, and we said, if you hang on, we'll. And I felt we had a short period of time, a window in which we had to deliver. The good news is that when we did recruit Terry Magnuson, we first of all built the. I guess genetic medicine was the first one of those enormous buildings that we built, which housed his program. And then he helped us recruit more scientists by saying, these people make promises and they deliver on their promises. We did exactly what we said we would do. We built the facilities we said we would build. There were a number of key faculty that we had to work hard to retain. Georgia Tech and Florida and Texas came after Joe DeSimone the first time. Others came after him later, but it was that first bid to recruit Joe away that led us to, we made another big bet, and that was we had, in the construction of the science complex, we had enough money in hand to build part of the building, but we were going to have to shell in the 3rd floor, and this is the first phase of that science complex. Here comes all these offers about to lure Joe away, and we huddled in South Building and we said, we can't let this happen. What can we do? And what do we need to do? And what is Joe? What would keep him here? Because he's a rainmaker, and what he wanted really was for us to make a big commitment to advanced material science. That's not an area. That's the second area where we didn't have great strength. And there we'd be competing directly with the MITs and Georgia Techs and Stanfords and Michigans of the world, the great engineering schools. And so I said, well, what does that mean, and what does that require? Well, it requires we've got to take that shelled-in top floor of the physical science complex, phase 1, and finish it. And we need to give him about 10 faculty positions, not all at once, but over a period of time. I think it was maybe 4 years, 10 faculty lines. And we did all of that. How did we do it? We actually, because ultimately we were supposed to raise that money with private funds, and we didn't have that fund in hand. So we decided that we would make a bet. Again, this was risky. We bet our overhead receipts, our future overhead receipts from revenues, from research that we would achieve in funding if we not only kept Joe and hired these faculty, but had that facility. Well, the long story short, we are now in the top 10 nationally in that field against schools, and none of the other 10 schools that we compete with, all of them have engineering schools. We don't. There must be a tenfold return on that investment that we made. It was another example, I think, of a big bet, a big decision, and not everybody supported that decision. I don't think that, I believe, if I remember correctly, Risa Palm, the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, didn't even support it. She was against it. She thought we were throwing too much money to keep one faculty member. But the provost and I were convinced that it was the right thing to do. We did it, and I'm convinced it was the right thing to do.
So it sounds to me like we can draw two major lessons from what you've just said. Number one, you can have a vision, but as you go along, things change.
Right.
And you have to incrementalize, and you have to realize that the role of leadership is not only just to have big bets, but also to be willing to go with the flow in a sense, right?
It's to be opportunistic,
okay.
Because this was not a conceived thing that we said, we're going to build a program in advanced material sciences. It really came out of the, and frankly, the other side of this coin is that you can't say yes to all these things. In fact, you say, in my job, in this job, you find yourself saying no more than you say yes, because there are lots of good ideas. But this one was, again, a strategic opportunity to position Carolina to be a national player in a field where we hadn't previously excelled.
So let's extend that then. What advice do you have about knowing which ideas to follow versus which ones to cut off at the neck?
I think it goes to, I think one has to assess two things. First of all, you have to know your institution and a sense of what it's capable of. I probably would have not made that decision, the same decision at Nebraska. And I wouldn't have made that same decision at North Carolina, at South Carolina. I felt that there was enough strength, enough substance to risk, and I knew that Jody Simone was an enormously powerful and prodigious and productive faculty member, the likes of which we could not afford to lose. And that was it was my assessment of him more than anything else that said to me, we've got to do this.
So a combination of trusting your intuition as well as the resource base that you have with you,
exactly,
was probably what guided you the most.
At South Carolina, we had people that I thought very highly of, but I would have been less inclined to make a big bet on them because I didn't think, because the infrastructure wasn't there, the rest of, and the level of faculty quality was not strong enough across the board to support an investment of that magnitude. That's why an institution of this kind of quality can afford to make big statements like that. That's one of the advantages that we have, and I think we're even better positioned today than we were 10 years ago.
And I think just to add to your analysis, I remember reading in one of the documents I saw that facilities matter.
Oh, absolutely.
And infrastructure matters, right? And I think the serendipity of the bond issue happening at the time, together with what you did with it, gave you the ability to keep the train moving.
Facilities absolutely do matter because obviously the key to any great institution are the people, the faculty. The faculty are what make a great university. And we were, on the one hand, had we not had this infusion of construction and renovation, we would have lost a lot of key people, not just Jody Simone, but scores of faculty would have found other opportunities. So we stemmed that, we stopped that potential hemorrhage. And more importantly, we actually were able to attract faculty. And then, what else does that do? Those great faculty attract great graduate students. And it's the ability, because what do faculty want? They want the equipment and the colleagues to do great work. And if they can have all those things, plus a wonderful town in which to live with a good environment and the other amenities that make for quality living, we don't even have to pay people as much. I mean, people will turn down, and I've seen this happen, people will not accept bigger offers in some cases because they're so happy in what they're doing. And the last thing they want to do is leave colleagues and graduate students behind whom they value. And so building that kind of that culture and that kind of overall support, it becomes a reinforcing, replenishing qualitative model that just an institution just keeps getting better. It's the opposite of that. And the opposite downward spiral is something you want to avoid at all costs.
It's a cumulative circle of upward mobility, built on a number of things.
And so I think these were excessively good times that in the early part of the decade where this infusion, and there's one other aspect of this that I almost forgot to mention, and that is, I used to say the biggest retention factor of all is letting the faculty design those facilities. So this was especially true in the science complex. The design of these buildings, that process was all led by the faculty in the departments. This was especially true for the physical science complex in the College of Arts and Sciences. Those faculty met with the architects, and the good news is the architects were very open to a very collegial relationship with faculty, and we didn't have any faculty losses during that period because they were all busy designing their new facilities. They were dreaming, and they were seeing their dreams being realized, first of all in blueprints and then in concrete.
So I think the lesson from that is that empowering your faculty and involving them and giving them the ability to see their futures and then basically make them happen.
Absolutely.
Is part of the role of a leader in this situation.
It is absolutely the role of the leader to give them and to actually step back and let them do it and let them take charge of this. The biggest mistake a leader can make in that kind of environment is to have a sort of top-down process. I've seen that actually happen, and there's one part of the university, which I won't mention, that was less collegial and more top-down. And I think it wasn't as successful as, the most successful example of this I've ever seen was the science faculty in the college in the design of their own buildings. It really worked. And the other thing that developed, which was also turns out to be one of our great strengths, was that because we had chemists, physicists, computer scientists, marine scientists, and then more recently biologists, working together in teams, building structures that would allow them and their graduate students and even their undergraduates to work across these traditional silos. We have built a strong, collaborative, collegial, interactive, interdisciplinary culture on this faculty, and that turns out to be one of our greatest strengths.
Well, I think also you're of the view that being able to recruit across disciplines and build collaborative teams that go beyond the stovepipes is one of the key requirements of a 21st century research institution.
It is.
Right?
In fact, I've advocated that in this world, especially in science, but it's also true, I think, in the humanities, we need to hire faculty in clusters and not just one-offs. That's not to say they should all be hired that way, but I think we need to think strategically, and when we can hire in groups that build interdisciplinary teams, that's certainly the smart thing to do.
Why do you think that is now? Do you have any theory on that?
It's the nature. Well, it's the nature of research in almost all the disciplines. The disciplines have now moved out to the edges, and so you've got. It even happens. You have an overlapping because of technology. It's from computer science to my own field of music, and visual art. But you see it certainly you see it in medicine and in all the health fields. You can't what they're dealing with goes over into the fundamentals of the genome, and so you can't. We've become a powerhouse, for example, in cancer because of the interdisciplinary strength. The Lineberger Cancer Center is not just an entity in the School of Medicine. It involves many departments in the college and the School of Public Health and the School of Pharmacy. It's that whole cross. And again, it's back to my first point. We're a great university because we have this strength across the board, and then we can play off of that.
So I also do know that you're very proud of some of the changes you made in the humanities at our university, given your background. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, that's true. And one of my points of pride here is that I love the fact that the Mellon Foundation told us very recently that UNC-Chapel Hill is the one public university that still values the humanities. This was already going strong when I got here, but I was happy to champion it and to continue to. That's one of the things I love about Carolina is that we have a world-class philosophy department. We have a wonderful program in creative writing and English. We have Playmakers Repertory Theater. We have we're strong in history. We're the place to study the American South. That was one of the things I said in my inaugural address, in my installation address, that this should always be the place where people come to study the South. One of the early decisions that Robert Shelton and I made when we did go into a series of budget cuts, we made a compact. Once we actually cut the library's budget, and we always regretted it. And we made a promise to each other that we would never ever again cut the central collections budget of the library. Now, many people would say, well, that's a 20th or even a 19th century phenomenon. Who needs a library? Well, we do, because we value what libraries hold and what they mean for, especially the humanities and the social sciences. So, and the Institute of Arts and Humanities, where I have my office, and which is one of the gems and jewels of this place. I think it's one of the ways we've actually kept the flame of the original spirit of this place alive, and it's the heart of the kind of broad liberal arts education that we provide undergraduates here. So that I'm convinced that spirit, which is part of the, and again, it's a part of knowing who we were, and where we came from. That flame of which is really the flame of American democracy and freedom, is really at the heart of this university, because we were born out of that same spirit of the American Revolution. So keeping that alive, keeping it strong, is very important. And that's not necessarily an easy task, given the drive of science, and especially health science and medicine. But I think we've done a good job and continue to do a good job of keeping that balance.
And I also know that you were pretty careful, given you came out of humanities. That wasn't the first thing you touched when you got here,
I thought it was important that I not. Performing arts, all of that stuff, the good stuff that I did happened later. I needed, first of all, to establish with the science community. Oh, there's another piece of this. I'm a very competitive person, and when I arrived here, Mary Ann Fox, a very distinguished chemist, was Chancellor of NC State, and NC State was presenting itself as the science and technology university. Well, I wasn't having that, I must confess, there was a part of me that said, we're not going to let them get away with that. But we never said anything. I never said a word to her about we were going to compete with them. I just said to myself quietly, we are going to exceed, and we're going to build such a strong center here that no one will question our supremacy in these fields. So it was partly that, but it was also partly that I didn't want to be seen as self-serving, that I was only going to be concerned about my own field or the humanities generally and the arts. So I waited until the second half of my term to really turn to the arts and to try to do some significant things.
I'm conscious of time. We could talk like this for hours, I'm sure, and get wonderful information down for our viewers. Being a leader carries with it also the opportunity to get scars.
Right.
And you must have made some mistakes. And what did you learn? What were the mistakes you made, and what would you have done differently?
I did make mistakes, and obviously everybody makes mistakes. If you're doing, the only way you can avoid making mistakes is to do nothing, and to be as quiet as possible. And obviously, by what I've just said about myself, it's clear that I made some whoppers. I misjudged some people, made some bad appointments. One of the most interesting opportunities we had early on was the opportunity for the business school to offer a degree program in Qatar. I took a large group of faculty over there. It was too close after 9/11 to not be without a lot of controversy. The big mistake I made, and this was, you asked me about understanding and really reading the culture. One of the things I hadn't learned sufficiently in 2002 was the importance of undergraduate students themselves in the decision-making process on this campus. I took 40 faculty. I took all the faculty leadership, the elected faculty chair, a lot of faculty from the College of Arts and Sciences because they were going to be offering the first 2 years, and some business faculty. And a few administrators. And we all, Sheik sent his plane. We flew over there. I didn't take any students, and I should have, because when we got back, that's really where the concerns began to mount. And not to mention the fact that the dean of the business school, I think, had not sufficiently led his own faculty to be supportive of this. And so the business school itself began to be another source of weak support, if not opposition. But the students themselves, I think, really killed it. Because, in fact, I organized, realizing my mistake, I organized a seminar. I actually got Holden Thorpe and one other faculty member to co-teach this seminar, a short-term seminar to study the possibility of the Qatar deal. And then I met with these students. And ultimately they asked, the penetrating question they asked me was, Chancellor, we agree that you can construct a 120-hour degree program and offer it solely over in the Middle East. But are you telling us that when a student never has an opportunity to drink from the old well, to celebrate a basketball victory on Franklin Street or Halloween, or do any of the other things that make life on this campus, or get involved in the social issues of the United States or the world from that, and the interaction with students on this campus, is that really a Carolina degree? Is that fully equivalent? And I had to say, no, it's not. I take your point. Now, I think if I'd taken some students with me, they would have seen, on the other hand, the value of that global experience and what we could have added, and the opportunity for Carolina students actually to go to Qatar and be as well as students from over there to come here. I still think the good outweighed the concerns, but I couldn't answer that concern because I had neglected to include them in the decision-making process, and after the fact was too late. And that was my mistake. I also gravely misjudged the public reaction and political reaction to my dismissal of the General Counsel, Susan Ehringhaus. The mistake there was that I didn't consult widely enough, I think, in my own inner councils to get a better read on how that would have been seen. Again, that was in a way political naivete on my part. So yes, I made mistakes. I made mistakes in not everybody I hired turned out to be as good as I thought they should be, or they were the wrong person in a job that they didn't do well, and I had to correct some of those mistakes. So everybody makes mistakes, but I think if you're good, you learn from your mistakes.
So it sounds to me like that mostly it's an issue of people, right?
Everything's a matter of people. Yeah. It all comes down to people.
So as talking to department heads or new deans or directors of divisions at the university, not at the central level of a large public university, what advice would you summarize for them now, given our conversation and what we
I think the most important thing for leaders to do is to figure out who your best people are and listen to them and learn. I've learned so much from my own colleagues, from faculty and from associates. We spend too much time, I think, worrying about the people who are misperforming or malperforming, and not nearly enough time with the people who are doing great work and recognizing them but also learning from them. The secret of success is making these good choices of people and then empowering them and supporting them in their work and trying to. The secret of success really is in everybody else being successful. And to do this job or any job like it, you have to get your own satisfaction from other people's success.
And just to conclude, looking at where the university is today and the difficulties that we've had over the last few years with all the noise in the economy and the angst around our country, where do you see the Tar Heels right now, and what do you see in the future for
the good news is that I don't think there's not a university that I would want to trade places with. And that's not to say we don't have serious issues. Right now we have major issues, both in our state and in our country, with regard to the future of support for public higher education. I am concerned about that. I'm very concerned about it. I think it threatens middling and weaker institutions to such a great extent that I worry about the future of American public higher education being competitive with the world. We have been the gold standard for the last 50 years. People around the world come here because we have the best universities and the best system, both public and private, of great universities in this country. And I think that's at risk by not just the economic factors, but by what we see with dropout rates in high school and low science and technology scores of our students compared with the other developed nations, and the fact that we are falling behind. I think Tom Friedman's latest book really addresses this issue very well. Having said all that, I think UNC-Chapel Hill is as well positioned as anyone. I don't believe the state of North Carolina, notwithstanding the most recent developments in the state budget, I don't think they will. I don't think that they will. I believe they will continue to support the university. But beyond that, I think this university has it within its own ability to generate support through tuition, through research grants, and through incredibly generous support from the private sector, to be one of the great universities, one of the great public universities, and one of the great universities of any kind in the world. And again, we build from strength. And I said when I got here in 2000, the writing on the wall was that there would only be 4 or 5 truly distinguished public research universities left. I think that's even truer today than it was when I got here, but I'm convinced that we are in that small number of great research universities that will continue to thrive and prosper. So I'm an optimist, and I believe we have a great future.
Well, Chancellor, thank you so much, firstly, for your time here this afternoon and for sharing your wisdom with our viewers. And equally, thank you for the many years you have devoted to the institution that we both serve. And I know our university is considerably richer.
Thank you, Peter.
As a consequence of your
Thank
contribution.
You very much.